Hey everyone, welcome back to Grunts and Normies. I'm your host, Ghost. We actually are going to have a really good conversation today discussing women in combat arms positions. We actually have a special guest, Nomad, who's here with me today. We also have the silent professional.
Hey, everybody.
We have the first lady, of course,
Hey guys.
and we have Furious, who's hanging out at the moment.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you don't have to flip that. I can just mute you over here.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
Cool. So, how are you doing today, Nomad?
It's not bad.
Not
Every
bad.
day you wake up's a blessed day.
Yeah. So, are you excited to talk about this discussion, or you want to lead, or what are actually, before we get started, tell us a little bit about your experience in the military.
Well, I joined a month after high school. I did 10 years, 4 combat deployments, 3 to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan. That was the initial invasion, 2003. Left again 2005, Sadr City, and then went again in 2006. Did a 15-month in Baghdad, and then also in Afghanistan. I was at Restrepo. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie, but that's where I actually was. And then I went from Kabul, around the Kabul airport area, to Blessing, and then yeah, did some mid team stuff throughout those years. Um, I when I was in Kabul, I was out of a place called Alamo,
Mhm.
but yeah, loved it. Wish I would have stayed in, you know. And it was just that time when every veteran knows when it's time to get out. Although it doesn't click for some of us. Some of us get out at the right time. Some of us get out later. You know when to get out.
Right.
You
Well, I
know.
appreciate your service, first off,
Thank
before
you
we
for your
even get
support.
started. So, since we have silent professional here, I'm going to let you two get started, and then I'll chime in that way for the normies that are out there. We try to provide an honest conversation between those that are in the military and those that are civilians. So, I may
Yeah.
have questions that may seem not necessarily a little ignorant, but for us normies who have never served, then there's always going to be plenty of questions. So,
No worries.
go ahead.
So it's an opportunity to drop some knowledge. Nomad. So, with our first topic today, we're going to talk about women in combat arms. I know when myself and you were in, that wasn't very prevalent, although women did exist that were attached as support elements that did experience some similar training, but never had a primary function in combat. So, what's your take on that, and how do you feel about the ever evolving military with women in combat arms?
Well, my first take is let's not make it political because it's going to be physical, right? And we got to also think of the mindset of the soldier. So when you see your downed friend who happens to be a male versus a downed woman who is your friend as well, who do you think that person's going to go for under duress, under combat? That's the mindset that we're going to eventually have, and we have to get away from. Right? I don't have a problem with women in combat arms. Absolutely not. I actually love it because it gives us a fresher look. They've earned their spot by man in every aspect. Um, Now, when it comes down to, let's see, rucking or gear, it's hard because we normally run the 60, 60, 80 pound rucks. And you're going from sun down to sun up. It's not a lot of women can do that.
That is true.
Yeah.
So, my next question to you, so you already kind of in part answered it. You said you think it's a good thing they've earned their place, but in part, do you feel that it's a combat multiplier or a combat failure whenever you incorporate certain females into the combat arena?
I mean, let's face it, there's certain things women can do that men can't do. There's certain things that men can do that women, right?
Okay.
and that's all. I mean, that's on every level. So to answer your question, I propose another question: does she add to my lethality?
Say again.
Does she add to my lethality?
Does she add to your lethality?
That's right.
That's
So
that's a good question.
because I'm all for more guns in my foxhole. All for it. I don't care what your gender is. I don't care where you're from, race, creed, color, or religion. Doesn't matter. We're there together, and we're leaving together. All right.
Absolutely. Well said.
So, there's not a lot of women. This is personal for me because there's not a lot of women that can handle the stressors of that. So, as far as say, we'll go back to that version where I said one's down, both of them's down, one on either side of each other, right? So,
Mhm.
think about that person being a woman. Can that woman, total combat gear, full combat gear, right, plus weapon, and the other person, pick that person up in a fireman's carry him behind cover, let's say 300 meters under fire?
I guess the answer to that question is kind of out in the airways until we get some more data on that, until we start hearing tales of heroics. My next question is, what do you believe the shortcomings or pitfalls are by incorporating women into combat arms jobs and having them do day-to-day activities?
I'd say the prevalence of men egos, because there's going to be a lot of sexual harassment, and let's just face it, it's a whole nother world, a whole nother world.
I actually have a question for you. You had mentioned ego, and do you think it would make them? Do you think it would make a woman in a combat position in the military more dangerous for the enemy if she had more of an ego, or less enemy ego, as far as you're involving your success for whatever your mission is at the time?
I'd say it depends on their mindset. What is her MOS? She could be a mechanic. She'd be the best damn mechanic in her company. She could be. I've even seen women Apache pilots, Black Hawk pilots, and they're bad. They're badass, plain and simple. You don't even get to be a pilot first. You have to go through all this training, and hell, you might be a crew chief before you even get to the slot. I'd say that's where I'm at with that.
So, with that being said, for those of you that are listening that are civilians that don't understand what he just said, with MOS, that stands for Military Occupational Specialty, and that stands for your job of what you do in the military. It's an imperative function because you don't just do straight combat in the military. There's different roles that are support functions that are interlaced, but they all have their place. And as Nomad was saying, women can fit various roles in the military that don't necessarily have to be combat, but all the roles are imperative. And as he said, men and women, they have special skill sets that, one can do better than the other. So with that being said, Nomad, could you give me an example of something that, in your personal opinion, a woman can do better than a male in a combat situation?
Let's see, in a combat situation, can do better or maybe just as good as, because
I would say better because initially you said that there's things that men can do better and there's things that women can do better.
I didn't say in a combat situation. I just said in general. I was generalizing.
Well, I'm
because
making it
she might be the better shooter than the rest of her platoon.
okay.
And that goes through training, but also the shooting's different when you're in combat as opposed to training. You're shooting on paper targets or little green. Now, when a real person pops up,
That's correct.
Could be different. Could be a game changer, right?
Okay. All right.
I have a question for you. Do you think there's particular branches of the military that may be more suited for female soldiers in combat positions, or just in general? What are your thoughts regarding that?
Not necessarily, because every military branch has its role. So, like as far as, let's say, we'll talk about the initial invasion. Well, Air Force, they were chilling in they were chilling in hotels. The Army and the Marines are out in the desert. You know what I mean? The Navy pretty much goes wherever it wants to go because it has to have its own entity in different places. Um, it just, once again, it just depends on what you're doing. You know, I don't say one is better than the other, but as generalizing, each can be just as good as the other. It just depends on training. There's not a lot of men that could do what I was just saying, you know, about carrying somebody down a mountain or down a hill or to the next berm under duress.
So I have another question for you with regard to physical capability. I got out before you did in the military, but do you feel that the direction that modern technology is going, that the alleged exoskeletons that they've been working on is going to be able to enhance an individual's ability to carry a heavy combat load? And with that being said, do you believe that that will empower and strengthen the woman's ability to be able to stand beside her male counterpart?
About that, you have to have a pretty good core anyway. So putting on that exoskeleton, it's going to go off of what you can already do, right? So it's supposed to enhance it. But if you haven't, let's say you just showed up and put it on, no, it's not going to take the desired effect, right? I don't know if it's going to help. I think if anything, if we don't know everything about it, it may hinder it. It may hinder her effectiveness.
Okay. And then lastly, the last question that I have, what do you think will be something that can help future generations of soldiers get past the sexual harassment and the military sexual trauma with the addition of women being added into combat arms units? What do you think would be helpful to prevent that and stop that?
I think to have these sexual these classes, so having sexual harassment classes on the regular every quarter, let them know, hey, this won't be tolerated. Let every soldier, sailor, Marine, whatever know that it won't be tolerated, and you will get prosecuted if you step out of line. Plain and simple. And that's the way it should be. And that's both parties, not just one. That's not just gender specific, because the other person can do it too.
Fair enough. Furious, what do you got?
What if superior commanders start losing rank and stuff like that? I mean,
to the mic.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So the superior commanders start losing rank to allowing that in their division or whatever else. I mean, when you have some kind of sexual harassment or something like that, given that it's the military, it's like we can just fit the bill, right? Whatever we do wrong, we can just pay the bill. You know what I'm saying? As far as being sued, because that's what happens with celebrities, they lose money, right? But you're talking about military, they can. It's like the Catholic Church or whatever. When they molest a little boy, they got enough money to pay the bill. You know what I mean? And keep moving. You know what I'm saying? So, any law where it's like a fine where you can just pay the bill, that's for the people who can't pay it.
Okay.
But in the military, if you're a 2-3-star general, I don't really know anything about, but we're gonna take away 2 of them stars. You gotta. From now on, your highest rank could be KP duty or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That hurts,
right?
And that's a consequence. It's like, No, I can't
So-
go for that
so-
consequence.
Yeah, just one second. But so before I'll give you guys a chance to respond to that, but before we dive down that hole, let's address the first issue. Okay, if there is a issue of, you know, whether it's sexual harassment, taking advantage, or, you know, anything like that, what is the normal punishment in the military for that? If either
Well, okay, so I mean, with my experience, when I was in the big army, usually the punishment, if it was pushed to a certain level, the punishment would be an Article 15. If it was like an extreme scenario to where somebody was raped or something like that, it can vary. Now, this is kind of a loaded answer because there's so many different intricacies that are interlaced in this.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
Here's what it is. You know, traditionally you're supposed to get an Article 15, you're supposed to get some remedial training and stuff like that, and you know, hopefully the issue doesn't happen. And not just an Article 15, you can get a letter of reprimand that's put in your military record noting that you did something dishonorable and stuff, and then that could possibly have an impact on your discharge status later on. But ultimately, depending upon who you hung out with, the company that you kept. So, you know, in my army, it was the good old boys system. So if you were interlaced good and you knew people in high places, then guess what? What they would do is either they would remove the female out of the unit, like if it was a female that was being sexually harassed, and then that would hopefully resolve the situation and just push her off to another unit. Or what could possibly happen is that they sweep a very bad situation under the rug, and the individual that's actually the actor in performing the heinous crime, they will sweep it under the rug and move them to a different unit all entirely, and they usually try to cover those tracks. So that's usually what in reality happens. And so that's why right now, you know, when I was working for the Department of Veterans Affairs, you know, military sexual trauma was a prevalent hot topic because it could happen at any given time. And so many of the soldiers, the airmen, the Marines, and, you know, the sailors, their stories and voices were not being heard because there was no document, no record, because it looks bad on the public image of the military. So anything to keep the image going, to make it look like it's untarnished, they're going to try to do that.
Thank you. Nomad, have you seen or experienced anything different?
Not from what I heard, because and you're an infantry unit, so there's no women at all. We have support units. So for my last duty station was in Colorado Springs, Fort Carson. We had, I think it was Delta Company, Echo Company. There were support units, and they were comprised of women that were truck drivers, fuelers, and some mechanics. But what I did hear about what was going on is, yeah, they get an Article 15. So you're in front of your captain, your CO, your first sergeant, platoon sergeant, your LT, and you most likely, if you were found guilty, you are getting Article 15. So you're not only reduction in pay, but reduction in rank, confined to not confined to your barracks, but confined to post for 30 days. And you could get a letter of reprimand, but that doesn't affect your getting out status. That affects your promotion status. So if you get out, you can still get out honorably with a letter of reprimand. That's just in your military file, and nobody else is going to really even see it. But it does affect you down the road if you plan on staying in for your career. But you can go all the way up to jail too, because I know somebody who did that. But that person was a civilian, and he was in the Army. But he went to Army jail and still stayed in the Army, and came back. And obviously, if you get convicted, that means you are an offender. And
Right.
he didn't do it. He still got convicted, and she lied, which is crazy. And he stayed in the Army. I think he might still even be in the Army because he's got to get a paycheck for the rest of his life, because nobody's going to hire him, if you think about it. So he did go to military jail.
So me working with veterans at the Department of Veterans Affairs, you know, veterans that have gotten the letter of reprimand, it's in their files, and it did have something to do with whatever unit that they were in upon discharging, and depending upon if they were well received versus not well received, um, that impacted whether they were going to get an other than honorable discharge, a general under honorable, or fully honorable discharge. And basically, it depends on who you know and what your status is at the time.
Okay.
So a lot of veterans came in, they would tell me about terrible things that have happened to them along the lines of MST. And because they had those letters of reprimand, when it came time to discharge, the current unit looked at that, and then they made a decision based off of that instead of the current, service that they were doing. That factored in. So it's really sad whenever you see that as a pitfall, because I try to tell all veterans before they get out of the military, make sure that you're doing everything that you're told. Try not to get any Article 15s and stuff like that, because it will impact your benefits getting out of the military. And if you want to seek it out through the VA, that's just going to be another hurdle. There is an opportunity to adjudicate the discharge and upgrade it if you have the certain parameters met to where your branch of service will consider that. But sometimes, it's not even an option. So there's a lot of veterans that need help out there, but they can't get it due to their discharge status.
I found this sheet, which is from in.ng.mil. Again, I've never used this website before, so I just wanted to reference this since
Sure.
both of you have been using the term Article 15, and
Mhm.
especially for those that aren't in military, just to kind of show. And again, if there's anything that you notice as we're going through this, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, obviously, but
There's 3 types of Article 15s, but I can let Nomad talk to that because he knows it just as well as I do.
Well, you can get company, field grade, and then
Summarized.
summarize. Yeah. And then,
company, field grade, and summarize. And it was more so this was the section that I really kind of wanted to look at. What are the maximum punishments? A reduction of 1 rank, fine of 2/3 of 1 month's basic pay, or for the month in which the offense occurred. Confinement for up to 8 days, reprimand, extra duty, or restriction. And again, you covered most of those. So
does believe if you get one, you're doing extra duty regardless.
Oh yeah, you're gonna be doing some extra duty. That whether that's freaking
CQ or
CQ or staff duty.
Yep, staff duty for
Staff
every
fucking duty.
yeah, let's see, reduction 2/3 basic pay. This was a thing that I kind of saw that caught my eye, and it was this parentheses portion right here. It says for the month in which the offense occurred. Normally in the military, and again, if you get in trouble, you're obviously going to JAG. You're not going to a normal either civil or criminal court.
Well, see,
so.
here's the thing. So when we break that down, JAG can be a part of it, but that's usually whenever you're looking at a court martial. JAG has nothing to do with it because it can be handled at the unit level. So a summarized Article 15, that's like a verbal reprimand, and you're going to get some extra duty with it. The company grade Article 15, or if you've worked in battalions for field artillery, so there's company, or I mean not company, but battery, I'm sorry. So company grade, battery grade Article 15s, depending upon what side of the combat arms world that you work in. That is up to your direct line unit. So that's going to be between your first sergeant and your commander. And so with that being said, they have the ability to restrict your pay. They have the ability to give you extra duty and stuff. Now, if you go field grade, so the reduction of the rank, that's a field grade Article 15. So they can also take your rank, they can take your pay, and then they can make you do extra duty. Now, with that being said, there's one other modification to it. So in most cases, if not all cases, is based at the unit's discretion. So the punishment that you see outlined there, and if you go up to the top of this page right here that you're looking at, it's going to have some insignias from what unit it is. It's at your unit's discretion as to how they carry out those punishments. So they could say for the month that you're in, but sometimes a soldier can have their pay restricted up to 2 to 3 months, depending upon the severity of the offense. And you're doing extra duty for that whole time too. So you go to work, and let's say you go to PT at 5:30, you get out at 7, then you shit, shower, shave, and then you return to work call from 9 until 5. After everybody else has been released for the day, yo ass got to report to either CQ, which is basically barracks duty, where you're watching the barracks. You can't go out and you have to make sure nothing stupid goes on, or you're doing staff duty, where you're going to go up to your battalion and you're going to sit up there and, answer phone calls, check-ins and stuff like that. You might even be buffing and waxing floors and stuff. You can do that too on that time.
Go ahead, Nomad. Did you have anything?
Oh yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with what he's saying because I've done all of those.
Well, I appreciate your honesty.
He was a bad boy.
Especially when I first came in, I got a summarized Article 15 because of the situation I was in, and the person I was with was making me late, and I was showing up without my gear, and I was in a whole world of hurt, and I was always in trouble.
Right place, right time, right uniform.
Exactly. So that got me right because I got that summarized during St. Patty's Day in Savannah, and this is when I was stationed at Fort Stewart. So I couldn't go down and party with nobody because I was in trouble. So So yeah, I learned my lesson quick after that. I mean, they didn't take pay. I was just getting extra duty. So.
And as we say, like they say the Army don't break you, but there's ways that it can make you pucker up that asshole and say, "Ooh, I shouldn't do that again."
There's ways they can get you, and they'll touch your soul with it too.
Right.
And I touched my soul when I couldn't party. I couldn't do nothing. When everybody was getting out at 2 or 3, guess what? Private Thomas had to stay there. So yeah, it was definitely a learning. There's no learning curve. You're either gonna learn the hard way, or you're just gonna learn.
Right.
Or you're gonna get kicked out. That's
right.
it.
And the thing is, it's like what people don't understand about that process is that when you're about to be a jackass and it gets to the point of you being kicked out, depending upon your unit, they can be jackasses and hold it up. So like, let's say, oh, we're kicking you out of the military. Well, that can take anywhere from 30 days to the next year, depending upon how your unit wants to drag it out. So they're going to make you suffer and then, get you out of there. But if you get kicked out on those terms, then you might get kicked out with the wrong discharge status. And then you're really going to be feeling stupid whenever you really need something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought this part of this sheet was actually pretty interesting on why I should accept the Article 15 rather than demand the trial by court-martial. And
yeah,
just kind of briefly looking at this when you guys were talking, possible maximum punishments at Article 15 are much lower than what a court-martial could adjudge. For example, confinement ordered by the Article 15 has a maximum of 8 days. Confinement ordered by the general court-martial has a maximum of 200. Also, if guilty at an Article 15 hearing, you do not have a federal conviction, unlike with a court-martial conviction. Additionally, most Article 15s, including minor offenses or first-time offenses, won't affect your ability to remain in the Army. Court-martial convictions can result in a discharge either by a punitive discharge adjudged by the court or administrative discharge after the court-martial. So I thought that was actually really interesting.
That is correct. So it's just like, that is correct. You have to pick and choose your battles of what's going to be more, effective with that one. And so you have to be really careful because there's some soldiers that'll sit up there and say, I'm not signing this. I didn't do it. But they don't have the legal expertise to know that, okay, I need to request a court-martial and whatnot. So when they don't sign the Article 15, it's still going in your record. It's just saying that you were being resistant and you didn't want to take accountability to it. And at that point, depending upon your unit dynamics, who's in charge and stuff, your life can either be made real easy or it can be made really hard. So it's just like, know the rules, know your options. But I would say if there's something that you didn't do and you can prove it, then great. But there's another thing, and we've talked about this before when I talked about military unit dynamics. You know, in the military, you don't have to necessarily have 100% proof that somebody did something. It's all based off of perception. So if you got 4 people in the room that, let's just say, they say that you threw some tomato sauce at a wall or something like that, right? That's the crime you're being accused of. Now, if everybody says that you did, even though you didn't do it, then it's based off of the perception of how they perceive it, and you can still get in trouble. So that's why sometimes it's so hard for people to navigate in the military. And prime example, you know, the military likes to make examples out of people of color.
A quick question. When you receive a potential Article 15, do most soldiers consult a lawyer or someone before doing it, or is that just whether or not you're going to go to the actual court-martial thing on whether you would
No,
consult?
most soldiers don't consult with it because most soldiers don't take the time to educate themselves in the process. You're dealing most of the time in that level of it, you're dealing with, you know, these young kids that haven't fully developed, they're not fully educated on things. And most non-commissioned officers, you know, either they know the information because they've been in trouble or they don't, and that's not necessarily something that they're going to provide them information on. They're just, you know, it's more like this: hey, you messed up, you're going to get an Article 15, and most of the time your rights aren't really explained to you.
True. Also, you know, there's not a lot of them that's going to be like, oh, well, I'll take a court martial instead just to prove my innocence. Not going to do that.
Right. They're just going to take the Article 15.
Just going to take the Article 15, but you can also, you know, plead your case in many ways. You don't necessarily have to take it.
The biggest problem with it is that whenever it comes down to pleading your case, most soldiers aren't educated about, I didn't know I could do that. You know, it's already done and too late, and they make you feel like, you know, you don't have a choice in the matter. And so there's a lot of soldiers that get screwed over in the game because they're not taught thoroughly what their rights are going through the process. Like, it's explained, you know, to us in basic training and all throughout our time in garrison. Okay, you get an Article 15, you're going to have to sign off of it, and you're just going to have to take your issue. There's nothing in there letting you know. So like the only way that you would know that is if you go to what was the NCO called? The EEO NCO that's stationed in your
EEO.
unit. They'll know about that. Or if you go to IG directly. But see, the thing is, another thing that soldiers don't have the ability to do is most of the time they don't get time to go to like IG or, you know, educate themselves. So they're always training, they're always doing something. And like, if a unit knows that you're possibly going to put in a complaint against them, they'll just make it to where you can't get away from training to where you don't have time to do that stuff.
So yeah, and to second that, so that's technically all would happen if somebody got brought up on charges on sexual harassment on a female. Pretty much how it would go. And you know, it's almost like a he said she said thing, but if it happened, it happened. You know, and like the professional said, most of the time they will move that person one or both from the original unit to see if that helped out. And it's not really sweeping under the rug, but it is. It's kind of a gray area because you have to do that anyway. So they'll use that instead of doing paperwork.
Right.
Because that goes all the way up to the chain of command. I mean, the big guy. So whether it's your battalion commander or your brigade commander, they're going to know about it too, because they don't want to be blindsided. And if they are blindsided, then that company commander is going to have a serious problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, but women in combat arms, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on what you're going for, you know. And I never got your take on it, silent professional.
My take on what?
Women in combat arms.
Well, you know, so my time in the field artillery, we didn't have women. My time in the special forces, we had some women, like you said, in support elements. And so the army that I was in, as the same army that you were in, you know, women were basically like the unicorn. They were there, but they weren't put into roles that women are more likely than not going to be at a higher risk than men. At least that's the perception. You know, combat is combat, and you're going to be in danger regardless of the way. Like, the enemy doesn't care about UCMJ or Geneva Conventions. They're going to do what they're going to do to you. So I feel like, you know, people have a misconception about like what happens in combat. You know, they're, you know, if they want to take advantage of you, they want to sexually assault you, they don't care if you're male or female. They're going to do what they're going to do to you. And you know, the thing is we know that women are physiologically not as strong as men, but if you stop looking at a woman as the weaker asset in the situation, or should I say the weaker being, and we just make it commonplace, I feel it would be fine. You know, in my time, we didn't want women in combat at all whatsoever, because when you have women in combat, you have these types of risks that pose a threat to your combat force. One, what if a woman gets pregnant while overseas, you know, regardless of birth control? So then that's a liability. Two, you know, what if a woman has, you know, very attractive features, and because you have overzealous idiots that are in all walks of the military that can't stop, you know, objectifying and doing stupid stuff, then that also causes problems, especially if that idiot gets other people to conspire with them and then start causing problems for that. So, you know, that severely damages the morale and severely damages things. Now, what do I think about women in combat arms? I feel that it's a necessary thing, and here's why. There are so many militaries around the world where everything's unisex. So if we stop sitting up here looking at, you know, okay, you have breast, you have a vagina, you have a penis, you know, and stuff like that. If it becomes commonplace and we stop worrying about those things, it's kind of like prohibition. You know, when everybody couldn't do the alcohol, they were doing everything that they could to have it. But when everybody was allowed to have it, everybody's used to it, and it's just the way that it is. You know, once you work out the chaos, then I feel like we'll have a more effective, you know, combat teams and strike forces out there in the world. So that's my thought on it. Because women in the military being in combat roles, you go to Israel, where I've been, you know, women are a part of the military and they're in frontline combat like everybody else. You go to many other, you know, militaries, women are right there with the men. Whenever I spent time in Balad, you know, the women of the British military, they used to sunbathe on their hooches with their breast out and everything like that, and nobody batted an eye. But see, like, we were told as Americans, don't look over there, don't do this, don't do that. But you know, the Brits, they did things their way, and that was how they were able to do things. So with that being said, I feel like it's something that was a long time coming. And I feel like, you know, in order for it to work, it's just we're going to have to get all the chaos out of the way and have these teachable moments so that we know what to do going forward. You know, so as for what we're talking about, the sexual assaults, the sexual harassment, military sexual trauma, unfortunately, in order for things to get better, we need some scenarios of what we're going to be exposed to in order for us to come up with a process and get it in place to stop the madness and make it a safe place, at least around your peers and comrades while serving in the military.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. Especially, I don't know, you were in Baghdad, right? 05?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We were in Baghdad at the same time, so we saw what was going on in Green Zone. Women
Mhm.
right there, and
Oh, yeah.
NATO counterparts were right there with them. And then to say more on that, I was contracting a couple of years ago. They were over there in Europe too on the NATO bases, same right by men. So I don't have a problem with it at all.
You know, it's just the problem that I see with it is maturity. And I
Mhm.
think everybody thinks of the only thing that people comes to mind is like women being the weaker being, and they always think about sex with it. And I'm like, if we can change the mindset and just say, all right, so what, a woman's there, oh, so what, she's pretty, whatever, and stuff like that. We still got a job to do, because you said something earlier about a woman on the battlefield dying, bleeding out in combat versus a man. Well, instinctively, because of the gender roles in society, instead of it being a unisexual vision and just people are people, men are inherently going to save what they consider the weaker being, as opposed to looking at it from an objective standpoint and saying, okay, I'm going to get everybody that I can. But it doesn't happen that way. And that's due to our societal programming and indoctrination about, fixed gender roles and what a man's supposed to do, because that plays a factor into what you're going to do on the battlefield, regardless of your training.
Right.
Wanted to show this real quick. We have a picture of Lori Robinson. According to this is an article written by her and this gentleman right here. She was the first woman in U.S. history to lead a combatant command.
Right on.
And the reason why I wanted to kind of show this article, this is from Brookings. It had a few stats to kind of shed a little bit of light in regards to 6% of 4-star generals have been women, even in the period after the glass ceiling, meaning allowing women to be in combat positions. As far as this kind of highlights the women warriors in the military, and it goes into kind of explain between some of the stats regarding specifically Air Force and the Marine Corps. It doesn't really touch on Army and the other branches, but if I can find that spot, and I should have actually highlighted it, so I apologize.
Branches.
Say that again, Nomad.
Because I think it's worse than those two branches.
What about children in the military?
Yeah, I think it's worse than those two branches, to be honest. So,
Furious, what did you say?
So what about children in the military?
What's your question with that?
Like, when they gonna start implementing that?
Well, what's the definition of a child? Are you talking about lowering?
Are you talking about, as you see in other militaries across the world, having child soldiers?
Yeah.
And you're
Where
saying
they give like 10-year-olds AK-47s.
other than
send them
Africa,
out there.
what other developed nation has that?
right?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, that's something that happens, you know what I mean?
Yeah, in
They have
Africa,
just children out there.
nation.
From my understanding, with women in the military in the beginning, you know what I mean, they didn't have women on the battlefield because of, like you were saying, men would fall apart when they see the women, and on both sides, they would just fall apart when they seen the women get shot up or something like that. And yeah, like you were saying before, because of the cultural standings on how men and women are supposed to be, and that's usually when something goes wrong, they say women and children first, you know what I mean? And they try to get them out the way. Now, I guess people perceive them as to be weaker or whatever, but like you were saying, in some military places, they have women on the front line. They have women in their special forces, women in the Mossad and all that stuff. And they also have children too. They have children out, placing bombs and shooting guns. And, I mean, it's
modern age, World War I, World War II, women took a lot of the factory work. They took all the other works.
Yeah.
Right.
Men were gone. Right. So when the men came back, they were a force to be reckoned with, because now we are as equals. You got no choice to let us in now.
And the thing is about women, whenever it comes to being effective in combat, like things that women can do that men cannot do, now, if we're not factoring in how things are currently in the United States of America, I can't speak to other countries, women are some of the most effective saboteurs whenever it comes to espionage and getting stuff done, because they can do things to men that men don't typically want to do to other men. And if you get what I'm getting at, the art of seduction is a motherfucker on the battlefield. You're stressed out, and if you feel like you can get that stress out and you can build a rapport, well, guess what? The sky's the limit whenever it comes to gathering intel.
Here's a question. Obviously, in the past, the past is obviously the past, but let's look at it from a current perspective or even moving into the future. If you were currently active in the military and you come across again a female combatant, are they, or is there any standard operating procedure as far as how they're to be dealt with? Or are they treated the same? Or
You mean an enemy combatant? So here's the thing: is it in a capacity where I shoot them to kill them, or a capacity where I detain them and take them
What's
in?
the ROE? Where are you
Yeah,
at?
what's the rules of
So
engagement
many
here?
things that go along with that.
right, and I apologize, and this is again
Sorry.
just just
Vague.
my own ignorance, but like let's say it's actual like war, like there's a
Well,
shootout going on.
well,
and-
then the thing is like she's no different than anybody else. I don't want to bring up some of my own traumatic experiences, but I'll just use one as an example, and I can't give you too many details.
Oh no, that's fine.
But there was a mission that was ran on one of my deployments. There was a woman that had a had a grenade where she pulled the pin on it and stuff, and it's a split-second decision that you have to make. It's run the odds of hoping that grenade's not going to go off and frag you and your whole team, or take that woman out and allow that woman to get blown up and stuff to save your team. Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, every single decision that I made is based off of keeping me and my team safe. So with that being said, she got to go, and that's exactly what happened.
I appreciate you sharing that. I was able to find that section. Percentages have roughly doubled in the last generation for various services, but even today, average across 4 Department of Defense services, women represent only 1 out of every 6 Americans in uniform, ranging from about 8% in the Marine Corps to 19% in Air Force.
Right. Because it's not for everybody. Not
Right,
everybody.
right.
Not every man or father wants their little girl to go in the military. It's just one of those things. Unless you've already been in the military and they want to be like you or something of that nature. Not a lot of them want to go in, and that's
Right.
fine. It's not for everybody.
What did you say?
Oh, go ahead. No, go
I
ahead.
said, would you rather have them in the military or on the pole? You know what I mean?
I'd rather have them neither. I'd rather have them doing something to enrich themselves, to put themselves in good positions in life, if that's what they choose to do. There's nothing wrong with the poll, but
Well, because he said not every father want to see their little girl in the military, unless it's like a family lineage thing.
Oh, no, I understand that
So you're
Yeah.
basically saying, which would I rather choose? Will I have her on the pole or in the
Yeah,
military?
like would you rather her being threatened life with bullets, or
The next
threatened
question
with-
is, what does she want to do to make her happy? What does she want to do for herself to make her happy?
right?
Right.
It's a whole
You
nother
can't-
war zone.
you can't make her
I know
happy.
it's a whole nother war
There's two
zone.
different wars being fought. There's one that's a mental war and a sexual and spiritual war, and then there's the war for money, time, goods, and oils and all that stuff.
Well,
It's two different. No matter how you look at it, no parent wants their kid doing a lot of things that they do when they
Right.
grow up.
but those are like,
And me being a military brat, I'm just gonna tell you what my grandfather straight up told me: you are not allowed to go into the army. If you do anything, you go Navy. And with that being said, none of those were an option for me.
well, I just see them as like two sides of the coin. One is more
You're looking at it
extreme than
from
the
a
other. You know
father's
what I
point
mean?
of-
Because you
a
either,
father's point of view.
one is like super life threatening, the other one is like super duper sexual, and which is like they're
No,
just the
that's
opposite
life- that's
extremes to
life-threatening
me.
too.
Huh?
That's life threatening too, because you got stalkers.
I mean, I'm just thinking. I'm thinking on the side of if it's being done right. If you go to the military and everything is perfect as far as military goes, you know what I mean. If you don't have to worry about none of the politics, none. All you have to worry about is. I know it's not like that, but that's what I'm determining it by. I don't.
It's
I mean,
kind
because
of-
going to your car in the wrong neighborhood would be just as life threatening as either one of them. You know what I
True.
mean? But in all probability, going to your car isn't dangerous. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying.
Well,
It is in the real sense, but as an idea thing, you know what I mean? I'm gonna go to my car. I forgot my pop in there. you're not, when you walk out the house, you're not thinking, I'm going to get hit with a bomb. You know what I mean? It's just,
Right. No, I think
Yeah,
that's
and that's why I'm saying, like, under ideal circumstances
Mhm.
where the military is correct and whatever prostitution or exotic dancing or something like that is correct and you're protected, nobody's gonna hurt you. What is it that will put violence above like sex? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It's no difference than I'll give my son GI Joes and I'll let him watch Dragon Ball and Power Rangers and they're fighting and killing each other, blowing up planets versus, you know, are they kissing? No, I don't want my child to look
Right.
at love or sex or anything else like
They're
that.
gonna get
'Cause
more
that's
of that in the military.
What
than they
we
will
will
in the
do-
home.
but you're still going over what
Right.
I'm saying in the ideal circumstances. People would much rather choose violence
Yeah.
over, you know, love or sexuality. They
Like
were
I said,
right.
know.
What we will do is
I'm sorry, I
No,
didn't
no,
mean
no.
that.
I think that's a really good conversation. I will note it down the table. I will give the silent professional as well as Nomad a chance to just respond in a smaller capacity, but we can make that another topic. Go ahead.
sorry.
No,
That's
you're
fine.
you're fine. No, I had to process what you're saying, and I see what you're saying, but it's, if you had a textbook picture perfect world, then I see exactly what you're saying, but we wouldn't be having this conversation if there was a process already worked out for it. So what I'm going to say, in my personal opinion, you know, like what does it boil down to that makes an innate difference is it's your intent of what you're trying to accomplish with this, you know. So like, for instance, you have a stripper that, you know, dances on a pole, makes her money and stuff. Well, there's risks involved, but you have a young lady that becomes a soldier. There's also a risk involved. So I think it's, you know, what is the intention behind it, and what job is going to be any more or less dangerous, because in the military, we got it broken down to a science as to what your life expectancy is going to be versus, you know, I don't think anybody's done the research as to what a dancer's life expectancy would be, but I guarantee it would be a lot longer than what a soldier's life expectancy would be on a battlefield.
On average.
And what we could do is we can actually do the research before we have the full
Right.
conversation. And, you know, here at Grunts and Normies, we support local businesses for what, you know.
I was really just getting down to like the comment I want to say that Nomad had said about daddies don't want to see their daughters, you know, in that role of like the military. So that's not really about life expectancy, but more on perception and how their family would be viewed through you know. So
Right.
how I feel as a father as my daughter as somebody in the military,
Okay.
or how I feel as a father as my daughter as, hey man, I saw your daughter in the pole last night. You know what I mean? She can clap them cheeks. You know what I mean? And so it's like, that's more of along the line. Not really, am I worried about my daughter's life as far as is she going to die, or am I worried about my daughter's life as is she in a decent
So does
profession?
it?
And that's what I'm saying.
And-
like,
So are
man,
you saying it? What, you know, the perception of it, like the perception from the father's angle? What's more acceptable? Hearing about my daughter on the pole clapping cheeks, or hearing about my daughter in the military? Is that what you're getting at?
yeah, or possibly, you know, in the military, possibly dying or whatever else.
Right. And
Yeah.
I can kind of see it. And again, we'll table it for
Yeah.
now.
Let's let Nomad.
But from what Furious is basically explaining, it's not just the social, the moral, the face of the family. It could also be the quality of life long term as well. So
Mhm.
that could be the comparison that could be made in between the
Oh.
military,
Yeah.
not only surviving combat, but again, you still have to deal with the issues coming back from having those negative experiences. And one could also argue, partially from what I gathered from listening to Furious, is, you know, you go do that. Yeah, there's a risk involved with the type of people that you may interact with while you're doing X, Y, and Z or whatnot. And then, of course, there may be the backlash of everyone knowing, hey, she did this, or everyone saw that. And of course, again, I don't want to necessarily make a direct comparison to PTSD, just because, again, I'm lucky enough to where I didn't have to experience some of the things that both you, Nomad, and the Silent Professional had to experience in order for me to enjoy my freedom. But at the same time, just trying to understand your guys' perspective, as well as, is someone who is, whether it's the poll or OnlyFans or anything like that, and then having to deal with, again, those unknown issues. Since even though OnlyFans has been around at least for a little bit, we're still in unknown territory because it hasn't been around as long as pole
Right.
dancing or as the oldest profession, in humanity. What's that? Go
I
ahead.
said you weren't going to mention Backpage at all.
Well, like I said, we will table that, but I will allow Nomad opportunity to respond, and then we'll go from there. Go ahead, Nomad.
Wow. Yeah, those two don't even mix, and those can be as lethal as a grain of sugar or a grain of salt. It doesn't really matter. I'm just stating the facts as I know them, and as far as a father, I'm a father, and as long as that woman is happy doing what she's going to do, I'm going to support her 110%.
Right.
So it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because as long as she knows what she's getting herself into, regardless, I'm gonna help her both ways.
Yeah, you just hit a nail on the head with something, because the way I see it, based on my mindset, I've created my own legacy. So the thing is, people know who I am, what I am, and how I do business and stuff based off of the legacy I created for myself. So my daughter, however she wants to create her legacy, that's her business. Some people, based off of their cultural background, ethnic, foundation and values that are instilled in them, they feel like, if one person in the family messes up, it brings shame to your legacy and all that other stuff. But what we're finding out, that's not true. If that were the case, well, let's look at Kim Kardashian and stuff like that. We can talk about, her exploits of, making, naughty movies and stuff like that. Did that tarnish her legacy? No, actually, she's been very successful and very powerful, obtaining her finances and living a normal life. Now, she has a lot of criticism that comes, with it, but did it actually tarnish her legacy? Because her money is still there.
Yeah. And
money is definitely a part of the legacy for people in the top 1% elitists,
Right. So a lot of people too worried about how they feel, how it makes them feel. It's not about you. So if that daughter of mine wanted to go to the military versus on the pole or whatever, you know what? That's not about how I feel. No, I ain't got nothing to do with it. It's about what she wants to do, and if she is happy, therefore I'm for her. That's it. Case in point, my wife, she's from another country. She's from Albania, right? Kosovo, by way of Kosovo. Her parents are Muslim. I'm Catholic. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't because I was black. It was because I was Catholic. They didn't like me. They didn't even give me a chance. All right. And it's because of how they felt. Instead of supporting their daughter, my wife, they decided, oh, well, we don't like him because we haven't met him, haven't seen him. We don't like him because he's Catholic. Plain and simple, not happening. Be done with it, right? She said, no, I'm done with you. And then we're married. You know what I mean? So she made it about her because she supported them. She didn't get the support from her family. So she's out.
How long have you been married for?
We just got married this year. But I've been with her before. I've been with her for 4.5 years.
Well, congratulations on that. That's cool.
It's all about what people, their perception, and then what makes them happy. No, it's not about you. It's about that person and what we're talking about. So that woman in combat, if she chose to be a combat engineer or artillery or a fister, JTAC, if she wants to be in infantry and went to ranger school and all that other stuff, well, hey, go ahead, little shorty. I got you. But what's going to happen when you get there. They're going to be all over you. Make sure you take care of yourself, who's friend or foe, who's,
we should
wolf in sheep's clothing.
Topics today.
So I'm just trying to stay on topic, we're veering off a little bit.
Oh, no, it's okay. And I I appreciate it. What we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to do a little closing thing. We'll reset and then we'll move to our next topic here. So just
right.
bear with me one moment. I want to say thank you for all our listeners. We appreciate it. And I want to say thank you for those that have supported and shown support in the military for your service. It's one of those things, especially being a normie such as myself, that I don't think enough people appreciate even some of the freedoms that they have, whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of expression, or being able to come on YouTube here and have this conversation, bridging these gaps in between not only our military or ex-military, retired military professionals, and of course the normies like us. So if by chance you hear this conversation or you want to be able to join, I do have the ability to bring people up in order to ask questions, or you can leave a comment down in the comment section. We're going to go ahead and reset, and then we'll be restarting the live stream up here in a second. So thank you, everybody.